How dare you have medical equipment outside? Karen screamed, pointing her gun at my daughter's ventilator. She had no idea I was trained in Delta Force. One smooth move and her weapon was in my hands. My daughter smiled as police took Karen away. You're my hero, Dad. Before watching full video, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. That disgusting machine has to go. The shrill voice cut through our peaceful Saturday morning like broken glass. I looked up from adjusting my daughter Olivia's ventilator to see a woman standing in our doorway, uninvited and unwelcome. Excuse me? I kept my voice steady, though my hand instinctively moved to shield my 12-year-old daughter, whose wheelchair was positioned by the large front window of our new home. That. The woman pointed a manicured finger at the portable generator on our porch. It's an eyesore and it's making noise. I can hear it from my garden. I took a deep breath, counting silently as I'd been trained to do in high-pressure situations. The generator was running because we'd had a power outage an hour ago. For most people, a power outage was an inconvenience. For my daughter, whose ventilator kept her breathing, it was a matter of life and death. Ma'am, this generator powers my daughter's medical equipment. She has spinal muscular atrophy and needs. I don't care what she has. The woman cut me off, her face flushed with anger. I'm Victoria Harrington, President of Mountain View Estates Homeowners Association, and Section 8 of our covenant clearly states, no mechanical equipment visible from the street. Olivia's eyes widened with fear behind her glasses. Though her body was severely weakened by SMA, her mind was sharp as a tack. She understood perfectly what was happening. Dad. Her soft voice carried the worried question she didn't need to speak aloud. It's okay, Liv, I assured her before turning back to Victoria. Ms. Harrington, this is medical equipment. Surely there's an exception for... No exceptions. Victoria stepped further into our home without permission. I've run this HOA for 15 years, and I'm not about to let our property values drop because you people think the rules don't apply to you. My jaw tightened at you people. 20 years in Delta Force had taught me to recognize threats, and this woman was definitely a threat, not to national security, but to my daughter's safety and our right to live peacefully in the home we had just purchased last week. The Americans with Disabilities Act provides for reasonable accommodations, I said calmly. That generator is keeping my daughter alive right now. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she glanced at Olivia's ventilator, the tubes connecting to her tracheostomy, then back to me with undisguised disgust. You should have thought about that before moving into a premium neighborhood. There are facilities for people with her condition. Olivia's small hand gripped mine. I felt her trembling. Not from her condition, but from this woman's cruelty. Miss Harrington, I said, my voice dropping to the quiet, controlled tone that had made hardened terrorists cooperate in interrogations. I'm going to have to ask you to leave our home now. Or what? She challenged, pulling out her phone. I'm documenting this violation. You have 1 hour to remove that generator or face a $500 fine. Every day it remains will double the amount. That generator is not optional, I explained, fighting to maintain my composure. It powers my daughter's ventilator. Without it, she cannot breathe. Victoria stared directly at Olivia, who was watching with wide, frightened eyes. Not my problem. Rules are rules. Something in me snapped at the callousness of those words. Not in a visible way, my training wouldn't allow that, but inside where no one could see. I will not be removing the generator, I stated firmly. Now please leave before I call the police for trespassing. Victoria's face flushed an even deeper red. Don't threaten me. Do you have any idea who my husband is? He's Judge Harrington of the county court. One call from me and... Dad. Olivia's ventilator alarm started beeping. Her heart rate was rising from stress. I don't feel good. I immediately turned my attention to my daughter, checking her vitals on the monitor. Deep breaths, Liv. Try to stay calm. See what you're doing? Victoria sneered. Upsetting a sick child with your stubbornness. Just follow the rules like everyone else. I ignored her, focusing entirely on Olivia, whose oxygen levels were dropping slightly. The stress was affecting her breathing. Get out, I said without looking at Victoria. Now. Not until you agree to remove. I turned back to her, and whatever she saw in my eyes made her stop mid-sentence. My daughter is in distress. Leave immediately or I will physically remove you from our home. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victoria's face. But it quickly hardened back into determination. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small handgun. Are you threatening me? Her voice trembled slightly as she held the weapon. not pointing it directly at us but making sure I could see it. Because I feel threatened right now. 20 years of combat training assessed the situation instantly. Small .380 caliber. Safety off. Finger improperly positioned on the trigger. Nervous handling. All signs of an amateur using a weapon as intimidation without proper training. You're bringing a firearm into a home with a disabled child? My voice remained calm, even as I calculated exactly how quickly I could disarm her if necessary. I have a concealed carry permit, Victoria replied, her confidence returning as she gripped the gun. And I have every right to defend myself when threatened. Olivia's monitor alarm beeped more urgently. Her oxygen was definitely dropping now. Dat, scared. She managed through labored breaths. Victoria's eyes darted to Olivia, then back to me. Something changed in her expression, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even shame. But it was quickly replaced by stubborn pride. Turn that alarm off, she demanded. It's disturbing the peace. In that moment, as my child struggled to breathe while this woman stood in our home with a gun, complaining about noise, something primitive and protective rose within me. Not the calculated violence I'd been trained for in Delta Force, but the pure, unstoppable force of a parent protecting their child. I took one step toward Victoria. Lower your weapon and leave my house. Now. Perhaps it was my tone or the look in my eyes, but Victoria took a step back. Then, whether from nervousness or deliberate intimidation, she raised the gun slightly. It was all the justification I needed. What happened next occurred so quickly that Victoria would later tell police she barely saw me move. The gun was out of her hand, disabled, and secured in one fluid motion that my Delta Force teammates had nicknamed the Ghost. A disarming technique so fast and efficient it seemed supernatural to those without training. Victoria found herself gently but firmly secured in a hold that allowed no movement while causing minimal pain. The entire maneuver had taken less than 2 seconds. What? How? She stammered, shock replacing arrogance. Olivia, I called softly, keeping Victoria securely restrained. Can you reach your phone, sweetheart? My brave girl, despite her distress, managed to press the emergency button on her specialized phone. Within moments she was connected to 911. A lady, with a gun, in our house, she explained between labored breaths. Dad needs help. Victoria struggled briefly against my hold. Let me go. This is assault. When my husband finds out. Your husband, I said quietly. The judge will be very interested to learn that his wife brought a loaded firearm into the home of a ventilator-dependent child and created a medical emergency. For the first time, genuine fear crossed Victoria's face as the reality of her actions began to sink in. I didn't mean, I wasn't really going to, she stammered. Save it for the police, I replied calmly, adjusting my position to check on Olivia while maintaining control of Victoria. Hang in there, Liv. Help is coming. By the time police arrived 7 minutes later, Victoria had cycled through threats, pleading, and finally sullen silence. As officers handcuffed her and read her rights, one of them recognized me. Captain David Morrison? He asked incredulously. From Operation Shadowfall? I nodded once, uncomfortable with the recognition but not surprised. Our small town had a large veteran population. The officer turned to his partner. This guy is Delta Force. One of the best. He looked back at me with newfound understanding. She picked the wrong house to threaten. While paramedics checked Olivia's condition, I explained what had happened. Victoria's protests grew increasingly desperate as she realized the seriousness of the charges being discussed. Trespassing, brandishing a weapon, endangering a disabled minor, and potentially, attempting to interfere with life-saving medical equipment. My husband will have all your badges, she threatened as they placed her in the police car. Do you know who I am? Yes, ma'am, replied the officer who had recognized me. You're the person who pulled a gun on Captain Morrison's disabled daughter. And I'm pretty sure that's all your husband will care about too. The aftermath came swiftly. Judge Harrington, far from defending his wife's actions, filed for emergency divorce proceedings the same day. It emerged that Victoria had a history of complaints from neighbors but had used her husband's position to silence them. 3 days after the incident, as Olivia and I sat on our porch enjoying the spring sunshine, a group of neighbors approached hesitantly. They brought food, flowers, and apologies. We should have warned you about her, admitted an elderly man who introduced himself as Frank from 2 doors down. But she's had us all terrified for years. My grandson uses a wheelchair too, said a woman named Elena. Victoria made us build a separate entrance at the back of our house so no one would see his ramp from the street. One by one, neighbors shared stories of Victoria's reign of terror over Mountain View estates. While they talked, something remarkable happened. Men with tools began arriving, and before I could ask what was going on, they were installing a beautiful weather-protected enclosure around our generator. It's technically a decorative architectural feature, according to the HOA guidelines, explained Frank with a wink. Victoria approved these for several homes last year. By evening, not only was our generator properly housed, but neighbors had organized a schedule to check on us during power outages and helped install a more permanent backup power system that would kick in automatically if the main power failed. A week later, the newly reformed HOA board, with Judge Harrington's full blessing, unanimously passed the Olivia Morrison Amendment to the Covenant, creating explicit protections for medical equipment and accessibility modifications. Victoria herself faced serious legal consequences, but in an unexpected turn, requested a restorative justice approach rather than traditional prosecution. As part of her plea agreement, she began volunteering at a residential facility for children with disabilities, the very type of facility she had cruelly suggested Olivia belonged in. 6 months later, Mountain View Estates held its first Accessibility Awareness Day in the community park. Olivia, whose health had improved with reduced stress and the support of our new friends, was the guest of honor. Her ventilator was adorned with stickers and cheerful decorations given by neighborhood children who had come to see her medical equipment not as something scary or unsightly, but as the amazing technology that allowed their friend to be part of their lives. As Olivia shared her experiences with curious but respectful neighbors, a familiar figure approached cautiously at the edge of the gathering. Victoria Harrington looked different, humbler, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a volunteer t-shirt from the children's facility where she now worked. Our eyes met across the crowd. She didn't approach further, respecting the restraining order that was still in place, but she nodded once, a gesture that carried the weight of understanding she hadn't possessed before. Later that evening, as I helped Olivia with her nighttime breathing treatments, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you think people can really change? Like really deep down inside?" I considered the question carefully, thinking of Victoria's transformation, of the neighbors who had found their courage, of the community that had rallied around us after years of fear and isolation. "I think people can surprise you," I answered honestly, "both with how cruel they can be and how much they can grow." Olivia's eyes, wise beyond her years, studied my face. "In Delta Force you had to hurt bad people sometimes, right?" My heart squeezed painfully. We had never discussed the darker aspects of my military service. "Sometimes," I admitted, "to protect others." She nodded thoughtfully. "But you always tried to give them a chance to change first, didn't you?" In that moment, I realized that my daughter understood something profound about violence and redemption that had taken me years of combat to learn. That true strength lies not in the ability to cause harm, but in the wisdom to know when not to. "Yes," I said softly. "That's exactly right." Olivia smiled, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her medical monitors. "That's what I thought. That's why you're a hero, Dad. Not because you can fight, but because you'd rather not have to." As I tucked her in that night, surrounded by the machines that kept her alive and the love that made her life worth living, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. How a moment of terrible threat had blossomed into unexpected healing, not just for Olivia and me, but for an entire community that had been silently suffering. In my 20 years in Delta Force, I had neutralized countless threats. But watching my daughter breathe peacefully, protected not just by me but by a neighborhood that had found its voice and its heart, I realized that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, but in transforming it into something that never needed to be fought at all.